Welcome to the Transform Sales Podcast, where forward-thinking business leaders come to share their experiences and ideas, learn from each other, and amplify their results together.
Hey guys, what's up? It's Amir Reiter with the Transform Sales Podcast. I'm super excited to have Ben Sims today with MarketSource. Ben, how are you? I think it's been maybe 5 years since we've known each other in the first podcast.
Yeah, we've done this together before, Amir, and it's always a pleasure to talk with you. Thanks for having me.
Likewise. And super excited to have you guys because for anybody who's chiming in as a first-time listener or a repeat listener, MarketSource, from what I know, is probably one of the largest, most established sales agencies in the world, I believe. I haven't done the full DNA check, but you guys are definitely helping some of the biggest brands out there, which is awesome. For anybody who's chiming in, typically we have sometimes first-time buyers of outsourced sales. Sometimes we have people who've tried it before and it failed. And the idea here is just to be super transparent and talk about mistakes, the things that people don't want to talk about, the mistakes that buyers make when selecting an outsourced agency and when working with the agency in the hopes that those buyers can avoid those mistakes and make some money. But before I get into that, it would be great if you could tell everybody how you got into the business to begin with. I think you've been in it for quite some time now, right?
Yeah, I've been at MarketSource for 8 years. It's the only place I've worked in the B2B outsourced sales space. Prior to that, I spent 15 years actually in higher education and helping sales teams there, and as well as prior to that, I spent several years in B2B sales, actually in the golf industry. So I came in with a lot of experience in leadership, a lot of experience with inside sales, which was growing quickly 10 years ago, and joined MarketSource to help them in those areas.
That's awesome. And where are you based right now, by the way? You're in
Alpharetta, Georgia, so suburbs of Atlanta.
You can see it's still kind of fall there. It's still kind of winter. It's getting out of winter.
It's starting. Everything's starting to bloom. The pollen is getting into all of our sinuses right now, but it's about to become beautiful. When it blooms here in the spring, it's my favorite time of year here.
Yeah, I'm a fan of it as well. I'm typically a Florida guy, but I was originally New York. But let's jump into it. Talk to me about what you've seen over and over again as far as buyer mistakes, right? Buyers are looking for the right agency. They're combing the internet. They're asking their friends. They're going to trade shows. They're in a buying cycle. What mistake have you seen buyers make during that selection process? And by mistakes, I'm not talking about mistakes they make that it's harder for you to convert, but mistakes that lead them down the wrong path, lead them to picking the wrong provider.
Well, I think internally you need to make sure that you have your own strategy in place first before you even start picking that provider. In other words, you need to have a laser focus on exactly who your ideal customer profile is. A lot of times companies are, going to try the spray and pray method, which doesn't work any longer. You need to have a real targeted audience, know exactly who that audience is, the size of the company, specific industries that they're working in, and then build that into the right persona that your message is going to resonate to. If you don't have that laser focus identified, because the first thing in sales is always, the first input is always data, making sure that you're calling the right prospects. A lot of times I see companies who don't really have that identified. And if you don't have that identified, this thing's going to fail from day one. So in order to build the right data lead list, you have to know your strategy and your messaging and exactly who to call and who is your message and your product, your service going to resonate to. So that's first and foremost. The second I would say is too much of a short-term approach to this. If you're expecting any agency, any outside sales team to come out of the gates running and be successful in the first month, second month, and you want to see that quick turnaround, it's just not going to happen. Like anyone, there's going to be a ramp. I do believe that outsourced agencies can have a faster ramp than doing it yourself, but there's still going to be a ramp. So a lot of times I see expectations just aren't realistic and too much of a short-term mentality. Hey, we'll hire someone for like 2 months, 3 months, and see how many leads they can fill in. That's just putting a Band-Aid on the problem. So you need to have I think you need to have a longer strategic plan when when identifying and bringing on board a partner. And then the third piece I would say is true integration with your sales team. So in marketing. So whoever it is, if you're hiring just for lead gen, you better we have to establish a very close relationship with your account executive that's going to close the deal. They have to work really close together on identifying the persona and the messaging and who's going to do what on a daily basis almost. And you better have the marketing material, messaging, and content all ready to go so that you can get surgical on your outreach. I believe that the days of hiring an SDR agency to do spray and pray is over. I think that's been worn out, and more of a very surgical approach, almost account-based ABX type approach is showing a lot more results than spray and pray is right now.
So just to summarize, because I love the answer. I tried best to get you to say the top one, the one thing, but it was hard, right? You gave almost the prescription of the three top things that come in handy, right? And just for those listening, number one is it's simply they're not in the right time to hire a sales agency, right? From what I'm hearing, but by they don't know the numbers, they don't know their math, right? So would you say that they're more qualified for a sales consultant, so right off the bat, 90% of buyers, if you're listening, look in the mirror and say, do I have a process? Do I have templates? Do I have playbooks? Right? Because that's step one to be even qualified to hire a sales agency. Because if you try to hire a sales agency for what a sales consultant does, you're most likely going to fail. Number two was unrealistic expectations, right? And I say this a lot on the show. You have a 6-month sales cycle. Don't expect a 3-month close, right? If you go to raise a Series A and you tell investors you're going to make money back in 3 years, don't expect a sales agency to make money back in 12 months, right? And then the final thing was just not only expecting quick results, but just spraying and praying, right? Like get with the times and make sure you're deploying a quality outbound approach, right? So it's kind of like these three things come together almost, and you've seen them over and over again, right?
The last piece I would add that I mentioned was the true integration. A lot of times an outsourced agency will come in and it'll be like, so the AEs or the sales team for the company will be like, oh, great, here's another lead from the agency. These things suck because the first one didn't close. And because the first one didn't close, the rest of them aren't going to close. And they just don't have that true integration and relationship. And that's critical at the very beginning.
Yeah, so that's a big thing too, guys. In the eyes of the bank, all money is the same, right? So if you're paying for work, $10,000 for an account executive or $10,000 for an agency, you should have the same expectations. If you treat an agency as if it's an outsider, then right off the bat, you got the wrong culture for a sales agency, which makes sense. And it's kind of funny hearing what you just said, because for me, I almost think that's a symptom of like this kind of world we created to where we have excuses ready, right? Where it's like a AE has an excuse ready for why he didn't hit the amount, which is interesting.
Right.
Yeah. Talk to me about mistakes they make when they're working with you. Right now, you got a buyer. Everything was good. They came in. They had the playbooks. They had their targeting. Well, they checkbox there, right? They had realistic expectations. Checkbox. They treated you like a team player, right? Checkbox. Now you're working with each other. Is there a different set of mistakes that you see buyers make during those phases?
That's a great question. One is, listen, we're more of a premium agency, so we don't just put bodies in and give them a lead list and tell them to pick up the phones. We put an entire tech stack into this, and that allows us to pivot and use the different technologies that are in my tool chest whenever I need to. And a lot of times companies are like, nah, we need you in our CRM so that everything's in the book of records here. Well, that can be integrated, or we need you to, hey, we just bought some licenses of XYZ technology. We need you to use it. And you guys, we're the experts. We know the technology. We know how to use it. We know how to implement it. We know how to reduce the red time that reps would have so that they can have more green time and productive activities, because we have experience doing it. So let the agency use their technology and then make pivots where needed. So that's one for sure. I'm thinking post-launch. Trying to think of what else. That's probably the most common mistake is, let the agency or the firm that you hired you got to give them the space to do what they have experience in, and sometimes again the impatience comes in.
Yeah, and anybody who's listening, it's a good analogy if you think about like working with a top personal trainer or a top tennis coach, and then you're giving them tips, you're giving them your racket, you're giving them this, and they're like, "Wait a second, I'm the expert you hired." I think in the outsourced sales industry, this is a common thing where people want to use their tools, but ideally, it's the results that matter. And when you work with companies like MarketSource, they do it at scale, right? So it's you have more to learn from their execution process and trying to fit it into your tools. I think sometimes that has a lot to do with the explosion of software tools that people have been buying, and they kind of feel almost like guilty that it gets a 10% adoption curve. What do you think about that? Do you think it's a symptom of just people being oversold software tech?
Absolutely. They go after the shiny object, and there's a lot of software technologies out there that, and they don't do the due diligence, or they don't have a scorecard to evaluate the right technologies and what it does, and will it actually increase productivity. And so we have all those playbooks out. In fact, that's a big part of my job, and I have a partner that helps me with that. I am talking to sales engagement, sales enablement data companies every week.
I make introductions sometimes. That's the other guy.
Every week. And most of them, we pass on, but we do have a methodology. We do have a scorecard that we use to evaluate them, and it's proven successful for us. And I do go to a lot of conferences, and one of my favorite things to do in conferences is I'll go into the expo room and I visit with every booth, and I am learning about what new technologies like AI, which is the buzzword right now, of course, how it is enabling teams to be more productive, and does it pass the muster info security concerns and data privacy and all that. So that's what we do, and that's what I think a lot of my competitors do as well, I hope. And so we have the time, because that's our job. Our job is to go evaluate those, whereas a lot of times the clients, that was a side job that they did, and they identified a shining object, and they bought into the pitch, and now they have to, they spent money, and now they have to use it, and it may or may not have been the best purchase.
Yeah. So guys, just to recap, if you're hiring a sales agency that has years and years of experience putting together their sales stack, and you try to interject yours, you're probably not going to get the results you want, and you're probably not getting the most of what you paid for. So it's really best if you're listening to experts to let experts execute with their process and focus on the results that they'll get, and don't be too distracted by that shiny object that often catches our attention. So I'm going to flip into this has all been awesome, right? I love the 3 mistakes that they make when buying, and I definitely could resonate with the mistakes that they make when working with you. Talk to me about your best clients, and of course I know that you guys are, you service a lot of companies. I hope you can mention some of them, because I know they're some of the brands that we work with every day. You're the guys helping them behind the curtains. And talk to me about, if you had to pick, and I know that you service both, software or service. Let's start there. Which would you choose if you had a magic wand and you could only pick one?
Actually, neither. I'd go with product companies that have products. So we're unique, right? And so I feel like a lot of what we talked about is especially lead gen oriented. How do you help fill up our pipeline and things like that? That's not really what MarketSource does or is hired to do. Our clients are enterprise companies. They are all brands that you will recognize. All of my clients are literally Fortune 500.
Did you mention any or no?
Well, let's see. They would be all brands you recognize. Let's just say that.
I recognize them.
So big Fortune 500 companies, several Fortune 100s, several Fortune 10s. So anyways, what they hire us for isn't lead gen typically. It's helping them with indirect sales. And so 2/3 of B2B sales is sold indirectly, all right? Not direct, not calling the end user and closing the deal yourself, right? Especially for enterprise companies. And a lot of times that's where they need help with, is who are the accounts that we have today that are not being served and not being paid attention to, either by our own sales team or our resellers and or any part of the channel. There's always going to be a big contingent, the 80-20, right? You have 80% of your revenue coming from 20% of your customers, and you're taking care of those 20% because you have to. What about the other 80% of your customers that are only generating 20% of the revenue? and chances are that revenue is declining year over year. Those are the accounts that are being underserved and not paid attention to. We will be hired often to call on those accounts, right, or channel partners that are not being served by you right now. And we will turn around and grow that revenue back, especially now when in times when new business is a challenge because of uncertainty in the economy. That's when you should be doubling down on your current customers and grow with them. That's the easier sell. Cross-sell, upsell, maybe you have some new products coming out. Maybe there's a new strategy you have with subscription. We can take that on. The other is, go back to the indirect channel. You may have resellers or agencies that have thousands of sellers combined, but only about 20% of them, I guarantee if you look at your data, are actually selling your product. What about the other 80% of the sellers within your channel that know nothing about your product because you haven't captured their mind share? So if you haven't captured their mind share, they're going to sell what they know. And if they don't know your product, they're not going to sell it. So we get hired to, if you need, bring in new channel partners, we certainly can go recruit them. We can onboard them so that they get off to a great and fast start and start generating revenue for you. And we can also go be your brand advocate and trainer for the indirect partners you have now and their sales teams that don't know much about you, and capture their mind share so that they start selling your product. So that's our sweet spot. We're really good at growing revenue through indirect channels, and we're very good at growing revenue through your tail accounts, let's call it that. And so that's typically what we get hired to do, not really net new lead generation.
Less top of the funnel, more, if you would say, customer success or partner channel or recruitment and growth.
But if we are advocating and training properly to your indirect sellers, your channel partners, then net new is going to come in.
Oh yeah, no, it's a better focus. I think that what you're doing is something that is talked about pretty openly. Focus on your clients, right? I think people just have a tough time executing it. So I think they kind of fall back to basics of let's get some new people versus let's take care of the customers we have. But which is a good thing, because anybody listening here who's struggling with customer success, partner growth, or channel growth, MarketSource is one of the top companies in the world that executes those activities. So good timing for people to hear that, because it's actually a big need for it, right? And I think people not only struggle with top of the funnel, but they struggle even more with channel partner, affiliate growth, and existing customers. So that's awesome. I love how you kind of skewed my question. You didn't answer software sales. You got me on that one.
So our biggest customers are typically, they do have services, but they're in, we have a wide variety of industries. We work in telecom, we work in technology, we work in the construction industry, we work in chemical industry. So big companies that have been around a very long time. Startups typically aren't, they're not in our space. And SaaS companies, frankly, they kind of have it. They have the modern sales methodologies down pretty good. I'll say, versus some of the bigger behemoth legacy companies. They want to be more modern, but it's turning a cruise ship instead of a speedboat, in which we come in and we can help them with modern sales methodologies and omnichannel, multi-channel methods quicker than they could do it themselves. Yeah,
and you guys are you guys able to kind of share a range where you guys are at? I think you're north of 100 mil, shy of $1 billion, or above $1 billion in revenue.
Yeah. We're well over 100 million.
Above $1 billion? Are you above $1 billion?
100 million? No, we're not $1 billion. No.
All right, but what I'm bringing up is that you guys generate that revenue by helping lots of companies in a big way, right? So that's what gives you your deep expertise. And how long has MarketSource been around? Since the 1970s, 80s?
Yeah, the original MarketSource started, and I will say this, IBM was their very first customer. So, I think around 1980-ish, and then we were acquired by Allegis Group about 15 years ago.
Yeah. So you guys are the experts. I think I probably met you 4 years ago, I think, and I've been watching your stuff, picking your brain for quite some time. I think it's crazy that people are out there researching their sales software. Just follow Ben Sims. He's been doing it professionally for a long time. That framework you mentioned, is that something you could share with the audience, or is that a proprietary framework?
Which framework?
To score sales platforms that are out there.
Oh, we actually have, there's an actual spreadsheet we have. My partner uses it more than I do. And it's a long list of questions that we have to identify, starting with info security and data protection. And what does, if we're going to give our proprietary data to you, what do you do with it? So we have to evaluate all of that, because we're very.
I'm going to try to pick your brain to get that checklist to give out to the audience. So if Ben's kind enough to share with it, you'll see it in the comments when we post the podcast. Talk to me about regions. What is the top region that you guys operate? Is the United States?
We are global, but North America is by far.
Is there a sweet spot when it comes to like company size or revenue? That
$1 billion. You got to be $1 billion plus company to really.
You got to be $1 billion company to mess with Ben Sims and MarketSource. I've known that for quite some time, which is awesome, and that's why I look at you guys as experts. Hope to find you some of those awesome customers. If somebody's listening who's a Fortune 1000 company, who's got that size, needs some customer success, where can they find you? How can they reach you? How can they pick your brain or hire you?
Well, I'm very active on LinkedIn, so you can definitely find me on LinkedIn and send me a direct message. In fact, a lot of companies do that, have done that. You can also find me here at MarketSource. Ben is my middle name, so they use my first initial here, eSims at marketsource.com.
That's awesome. So I appreciate you being on here. I hope to have you on some more of our shows. We're going to do different series breaking down different parts of the process. So I hope this is not the last time I see you, and I hope you can come to Colombia and that we have you on our list. So thank you for joining, and everybody, thank you for listening on the Transform Sales podcast. Ben, it's been a pleasure as always, man.
I'm sure we'll connect again. I always enjoyed talking with you, Amir, and best of luck in the summit in Medellin.
I just want to become a $1 billion company so I can make you proud, man. That's my goal. But yeah, I hope you come to Medellin, and we'll have you back on here again. And everybody, thank you for tuning in. Ben, I salute you, and talk soon, man.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
Bye-bye.